So I'm going to start by giving a territorial acknowledgement. So we acknowledge with gratitude that our galleries are located on the unceded traditional territory of the Sinixt Arrow Lakes and Yakanuki Lower Kootenai Band peoples in Nelson, and the unceded traditional territory of the Sinixt Arrow Lakes in Castlegar. We would like to thank the Sinixt, Yakanuki, Tanaha, and the many diverse Indigenous and Métis people who live here now for the opportunity to live, work, and host cultural experiences within this beautiful watershed. I'm going to pass it over to Natasha to just briefly go over a couple of tech kind of rules and anything else.
Great. Hello, everybody. For those of you that were with us yesterday, this is a bit of a repeat, but we do have some new people. So we ask that you do please stay muted. This presentation is being recorded. It's a good job that I'm just adding the live transcript right now. It's a good reminder for me too. So we have live captions available, and if you'd like to turn them on, just go to the bottom menu there and click on the live transcript button. We will have a Q&A at the end of the event, and you can post questions in the chat at that time, and we will read out these at the end of the event in the order that they were received. Thanks.
So for folks who were here yesterday, this might be a little bit of a repeat as well. But my name is Genevieve Robertson, and I'm here also with my co-curator, Maggie Shirley, who's waving. We're so happy with this project and happy to be here today to kind of conclude the weekend of events. So this project brings together 11 artists exhibiting their work as part of Overburden, Geology, Extraction, and Metamorphosis in a Chaotic Age. Overburden is a multifaceted project taking place across 2 rural communities in southeastern BC, the Kootenai Gallery of Art in Castlegar, and that exhibition is open a bit longer. It's open until August 21st. And if you are able to see it, it's wonderful. And it's open to the public without registration. And then the other exhibition is at Oxygen Art Center in Nelson. It's open till July 10th, so a bit shorter, and it's open to the public, but you do need to register through the Oxygen website or the Overburden website. The other piece to this project that's been really fantastic is we've created a website that's specifically for Overburden, created by Deanna Peters and Mutable Subject. And it really is like an exhibition in itself, and it will be up online for 5 years, I think. So it's a great resource. And we were just talking about the fact that there is a big resource list there that we collected from artists, and Maggie and I added to it as well ourselves. So it's references that artists have been interested in who are involved in this project, other projects that are similar, books, websites, exhibitions. So it was really fun to gather. So I encourage you to check that out. And there will also be a catalog which will be printed in August and will be available to order through the website at a later date. It's not there yet. So yesterday was a really fantastic day. Patty Bailey was our keynote speaker. Patty Bailey is a Sinixt member of the Colville Confederated Tribes, a weaver, and worked as an environmental planner for a long time for the tribes. And she spoke with us about over 100 years of pollution in the Columbia River due to the Teck smelter in Trail, BC, and their work to try to litigate the Teck, the company. And so it's a huge gift and resource, and it will be on the website, as will the 2 panels that happened yesterday, which featured 10 of the 11 artists, and were fantastic. There were mini artist talks essentially, and then some conversation between the artists. So I encourage you, if you haven't, to check those out at your convenience. The day left Maggie and I feeling so honored and excited to be part of something like this, and thankful for all the artists who participated and really put their hearts into the events. So I'll turn it over to Maggie.
Thanks, Jen. I just want to say, Jen, you've been fantastic to work with, and I just really have appreciated all you've done over the time that we've worked together.
You too,
but,
you too.
yeah, but I just wanted to say yesterday, like it was such an amazing day. I learned so much from each of the speakers, and but I think the biggest thing that I got out of it was about even though we were talking about geology and seismology and rocks and ice and whatnot, it's about our connection, our relationships between humans, and our relationships between humans and the non-human, and so that was just a really I think that was an impressive and profound learning from the day. So yeah, but we're here today to enjoy a performance by Sarah Nance. She's a multi-talented artist. If you come to the Kootenay Gallery, you'll get a sense of just how some of her talents, how well she is in just a whole cross section of art and skills. So thank you for being with us here today, Sarah. She's going to say a few words before the performance, and we'll have an opportunity to listen to the aria that she's composed and will perform, and then we'll take questions and comments after the performance. Sarah is an interdisciplinary artist based in installation and fiber. She works within the chasm between geological processes and human experience, locating their entanglements in order to explore a layered perception of place. Sarah is currently assistant professor of interdisciplinary art at SMU in Dallas, Texas. She previously held professorships in fibers and material practices at Concord University in Montreal, Virginia Commonwealth University in Richmond. Recent exhibitions include Galerie Octave Cowbell in Metz, France, the Factory in Djupavik, Iceland, Gallery FOFA in Montreal, Track Contemporary Art in Calgary, and many galleries throughout the US. Past awards include La Soupi Project Grant, Galerie Diagonale, and the Fountainhead Fellowship in VSU. Nance has participated in art residencies in Reykjavik, Skagastrand, Iceland. Much of her research continues to be based in Iceland and coastal regions of Canada and the US.
So Marseille Tidal Gauge Aria that you're about to experience is a vocal performance composed from tide level data collected over the past 130 years from a tidal gauge in the Bay of Marseille, France. Sarah Nance converted each yearly average tide level into a note within her vocal range, which is quite amazing, and set the resulting atonal composition to a poem from Rasu-Yong Tugen's Songs from the Black Moon. Sarah performs the piece operatically, drawing on the genre's propensity for magnified human emotion. The rising sea levels in the bay can be heard in the increasingly higher pitches of the aria. Sarah, over to you to say a few words before we begin the performance. Thank you.
Thanks for that introduction, Maggie and Jen. I'm excited to share this work with you all. I, of course, had hoped to do it in person, but this was a really exciting opportunity to sort of explore performing in a particular landscape and sharing that video with you all. So the piece was filmed in the Guadalupe Mountains in Texas, and it's a site that I have been interested in because it's one of the world's best preserved reefs, fossilized reefs. And so the mountain ranges that you'll see in the video are fossilized reefs. from the Permian time period when this whole area was underwater. And I also want to mention that today is the solstice, which is a really exciting day for tides, because as you may or may not know, tides, I'm sure you know to some degree, are really responsive to or determined by the moon, the positioning of the moon and the sun. When I first learned that the moon and the sun's gravitational pull actually deforms the earth and then displaces water, and that's how we get tides, that was really mind-blowing to me. So I just thought I would share that with you all, and that because today's the solstice, the sun is at one of its greatest angles relative to the equator, I believe. And so we have some of the highest high tides today. But yeah, I think that's all I'll say about it before we go into the performance, and then I'll be happy to talk about any questions that you have. I'm sure we'll have plenty of time. It's quite a short piece. So I'll look forward to talking with you all after it. Thanks for playing that, Natasha. As I mentioned earlier, that helps so much just to have someone else running tech things. I was going to say that I don't know if this happened for you all, but the sound in the beginning for me was coming sort of in waves of volume, which was kind of lovely when you think about the tides. But if you do want to hear it at sort of this even volume, it might help if you watch it with headphones on the site. But anyways, it did make me think about just sort of the movements of tide again, just in a different way through volume at the beginning. I'm happy to take any questions if you all have them.
I'm curious, Sarah, just to hear a little bit more about your actual process of translating the data into the aria, and just how, like, technically, how did you decide how to make that process work?
So, well, I'm just sort of smiling because that's a very low tech process, as are all of my processes really when I'm working with data. Um, I think because I'm such a hands-on person, maybe I'm such a maker that I really want to be involved in the data translation. I don't want to just sort of feed it into something that will get this super precise translation. So I had a visual graph of these tide levels over 150 years. And then I wanted to be able to sing the entire piece, although in future works, I think it could be interesting to have a piece that extends past what I'm able to vocalize. But this one I wanted to be able to vocalize the whole range, so I assigned the lowest value, the lowest tide level to the lowest note in my range, and then the highest to the highest note in my range. And then I'm trying to remember exactly how I did this, because I wanted to sing on half steps. I didn't want to get into quarter steps for this piece. So I sort of calculated the interval between these different tide levels and sort of approximated where they would fall in how many half steps there were between my lowest note and highest note in my range. So lots of little calculations, but all very manual and not just sort of feeding data into something.
And your choice to use that particular piece of music, which makes perfect sense to my ear. I couldn't understand the lyrics really clearly, but I'm wondering if you could speak a little bit about that piece of music and what drew you to it and that connection.
Well, the notes are the tide levels, and so the lyrics are are a poem from the Songs from the Black Moon book by Rasu-Yong Tugen. And the poem is, let's see if I can say it without singing it. In eternal night, we had each burned the forest in order to better see. Clouds of sorrowful ravens drifted upwards, imperceptibly blotting out the stars. So I was really drawn to especially that first line. In eternal night, we had each burned the forest in order to better see, talking about such a destructive act. And yet, if you're in a situation, if you're in an eternal night, what choice do you have but to try to do something to see better? So it's sort of an empathy for this really destructive human action. And then it's sort of setting off what I perceived as an even more eternal night of these ravens drifting up to blot out even the stars. So the sort of catch-22 of trying to see better and then blotting out even that last little bit of light.
Thank you so much. I'm going to open up to anyone else who might have questions or comments.
I might just hop in here. So this is really interesting to me. I think data visualization is or sonification is a really good way to bring attention to some of the climate change data, well, or any data that's increasing at an alarming rate. And where do you think the line between the aesthetic and the artistic and the scientific meet? Is there room for artistic and aesthetic interpretation in a scientific graph?
I think so, certainly. Maybe that's the obvious answer. Obviously, I think there is room for that. I think for me, something that I say often in an artist talk is that I really love science and information and data sets, but I'm also very glad I'm not a scientist because it gives me a lot of room to interpret that data or to manipulate it or to work with it in a way that I'm not beholden to it being a strictly factual set, that I can sort of stretch it or play with it so that it has maybe a stronger emotional impact. And I don't think that that means necessarily that it's less true. It's maybe less strictly factual, but I think there's still a lot of truth to that information, even if that emotional component has been sort of amplified in it.
I agree with you. Although I've talked to artists that believe it should be strictly according to the scientific data. So but I agree with you. I think there's room for artistic interpretation in there.
Mm-hmm.
And do you think one of the things, I think scientists have called on artists to help them out in interpreting data because people aren't reacting to the scientific data in ways that they are shocked about. And so do you think artists can play a role in helping to move people to a feeling place rather than just a intellectual place around climate change?
I absolutely do. I think I've been a part of a couple of different events that bring together artists and scientists, and I have noticed that there is a sort of consistent desire from scientists for artists to be the visualizers or the sonifiers or the sort of interpreters of the data sets. And even though that is what this piece does in a lot of ways, I personally sort of push back against art and science relationship being that an artist sort of interprets the science or depicts the scientific information, because I think there's just a lot more interesting ways that maybe those two fields can intermingle and come up with something new. I just proposed a research cluster with my partner, who is a sound artist who did the recording for this piece. His name is Burke Jam, if you're interested in checking out more data sonification and field recording work. But we proposed a research cluster at SMU in Dallas called, what did we call it? Proposals for an Expanding Earth. And we'll be working with planetary scientists at the university to just think about just this concept of an Earth that is expanding geographically to space exploration and conceptually through human geologic activity. And so I'm hoping that cluster will be an opportunity to keep exploring how art and science can sort of merge into this new space. And the book that that Jen was mentioning earlier, How to Make, what's it called? How to Make Art at the End of the World.
Mm-hmm.
I feel that also is a good sort of guide for us too, in just thinking about disciplines overlapping and moving into new spaces.
Sarah, I have one more question, which maybe leads from that answer, but I'm just curious, like we're seeing your performance pre-recorded online, and it's definitely amazing that we get to witness it here and then speak with you afterwards. But I'm curious, like from your perspective as an artist, thinking about, I think it was Gabrielle's question yesterday around your viewership or your audience. Like, what would be the most ideal or the most kind of gratifying way to perform that piece for you? In what context, in what landscape?
I know we were Burke, my partner, the recordist, is saying that was Punch Bowl, which is where we are right now, which would be totally wonderful. It's this sort of natural echo chamber that fills with water with the tides right on the beach where we are currently. I think that would be a really incredible space. I've been a tour guide in a couple different caves earlier in my life, and that had these really resonant spaces that I also would really love to perform in, to have that sort of the echoing feels important because of just the action of the tides, of the continuation of a sound on top of previous sounds, sort of building into this bigger moment. So yeah, hopefully someday in an echoey space.
That would be amazing to do the performance in a tidal cave and have that kind of history or memory from the landscape of being filled with water at another point in the day or the year.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
We were thinking it might be nice to play the aria one more time before we say goodbye, just for folks to get another chance to hear it. So Natasha's going to cue it up.
Just one moment, just making sure I'm optimizing.
Thanks for playing that again.
Thanks, Natasha. So before we go, I'll just put it out to the audience if there's any final questions or comments. We're getting thank yous and beautiful comments on the chat. So Sarah, thank you.
I was just going to say, I will record the chat because there were some really good references in there. And so if people want those, me to share those, just email Oxygen Art Center and we'll share that chat information.
Oh, here's a question. Is there a link between the Bay of Marseille and the space the recording was made in?
Thanks for that question. It reminds me of something I intended to talk about, which is that I'm newly interested in my work in sort of creating speculative landscapes or imaginary landscapes that I think I touched on just a tiny bit with the quilt work in the talk yesterday. But in this piece, what I am interested in is the sort of the long history of this tide record, this record of all the different ways that coastal landscape has existed over time, and making a connection from that to this place that is an ancient sea, that is a dried ancient sea. So I guess short answer, no, there's not a maybe a natural or existing link between the Bay of Marseille and the Guadalupe Mountains, but they're both these ancient seas in different ways.
How did the notes feel to the artist? Was there a sweet or eerie feel to some of the tones?
How'd they feel to me?
Yes.
The piece always feels really eerie to me, eerie and maybe a bit harsh at times. Yeah, I mean, I'll be exploring this work a little bit further again for a conference this fall. I'll be writing a longer piece that extends from previous tide data into predicted tide data through at least 2051. And so maybe there'll be some room to incorporate some more sweetness in that piece. Thanks for coming, everybody.
Oh, okay, there's one more question here. I wonder if you could speak a bit more about the relationship between science and art. I'm curious about how to communicate maintaining the art's ability to be more than simply a visual / auditory / aesthetic interpretation of the data. That's from Andrew Godself.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a great question. I feel like it's one that I'm still sort of trying to find my way into, rather than having an answer ready about how that can happen. I think the most exciting works, one of the most exciting works I've seen is by, I want to get her name right. Hang on. She has 4 names. I'm going to think of it in a second. But she planted a begonia seed in her tear duct and it sprouted. And then there's this image of just a close-up image of her eye, and then this little sprouting begonia plant, which clearly has like some interesting scientific implications about the human body as a place for plant growth, or what conditions this particular seed can sprout under. But then I also think it's just this very interesting rumination on plant and animal, plant and human relationships in a way that can't quite be pinned down to, oh, this begonia seed had enough nutrients to sprout in this tiny little area. So I feel like that's what I'm interested in, is when artwork moves beyond just being another way to interpret data or interpret scientific information and becomes something that maybe you can't quite pin down or can't quite categorize. I don't know if that really helps answer the question more clearly or just adds a little bit more murkiness.
Andrew says, yes, opens a new space.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
I agree. And I think because in that strict interpretation, there's sort of a assumption about the primacy of the scientific, whereas I think the artistic holds is not a secondary role. It's an equal partner in that process. And yeah.
But I think so often there's challenges in that collaboration, just as a structure, because it seems to me that so often the type of knowledge that artists and scientists are going after is so different. And maybe the kind of what's the word, like the power dynamics, I suppose, are often it seems to me that what can happen is artists are asked to be more illustrative or didactic in just exploring data, but are not going after the same questions as equals in the collaboration. I don't know if you find that, Sarah.
I think it's definitely been my experience in some collaborations and in some conversations. I have a lot of hope for this upcoming research cluster because our conversations so far have been just very generative and very respectful and really interested in just sort of exploring the ways that we might that we might overlap in research interests. I think the funding structure, maybe less so in Canada, but definitely in the States, contributes to that sort of unequal footing. Yeah, that can be a real challenge. Just having government interest in funding or institutional interest in funding behind you sort of allows you to do so many more things. But then, of course, it also comes with the catch-22 of being beholden to an institution's interest or the government's interest. So I don't know, there's so many things to think about and talk about and work through that I think are all exciting challenges.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think Randy's hopped off the call now, but Randy Lee Cutler has been involved in a multi-year project that connects physicists and artists and really is looking at kind of from the ground up how to create an equal collaboration so that information is emergent and useful for both fields. And so yeah, if you ever get a chance to speak with her about that, I think she'd have a lot to share, just in terms of her experience working through those collaborations over years and building relationships. And yeah. So just seeing if there's any last questions here. Just lots of people thanking you and saying what wonderful work it is. So yeah, we also want to thank you, Sarah, and it's been amazing to get to know you over the last couple of days. And I hope we can stay in touch. And before we head off, Maggie and I just have a couple of final thank yous to kind of wrap up this part of the project. And so if it looks to me like the workshops are actually full this afternoon, unfortunately. But if you did register, Randy Lee Cutler's workshop is at 1 p.m. and it's a writing workshop called Listening to the Stones. And at 2:45, Jim Holyoke and Darren Fleet lead a comic workshop called Storytelling Across Deep Time. And otherwise, we want to just thank a few people. So first and foremost, to the artists whose work we've brought together to create Overburden. So Gabriela Escobar Ari, Asiniak, Patty Bailey, Randy Lee Cutler, Darren Fleet and Jim Holyoke, Fema Icarus, Keith Langer-Graber, Sarah Nance, Tara Nicholson, and Carol Wallace. It was so amazing to work with you all. And thank you to the staff who worked this weekend to facilitate the programming with us. So Greta Hamilton, who's Oxygen Art Center's Literary Arts Coordinator, and Natasha Smith, who's Oxygen Art Center's Education Coordinator. And they also were kind enough to step in as our co-hosts this weekend. So thank you so much, Natasha, who's actually on the call, and Greta. And thanks to the executive director of Oxygen Art Center, Julia Prudhomme, who's been a fabulous support throughout the project, and Kootenai Gallery of Art executive director Val Field, who's also been amazing. We couldn't have done it without the both of them. And cheers to all the volunteers at both institutions who helped make this work possible.
We're really indebted to Deanna Peters, who created our beautiful website at overburden.ca, to Thomas, who photographed the exhibitions at both spaces, and to Keiko Leham and Tara Cunningham, who will be, Keiko will be designing and Tara will be editing the catalog, which we hope to will come out the middle of August. We are grateful to our funders and our sponsors who gave the resources to make this event happen, specifically the Canada Council for the Arts, the Columbia Kootenai Cultural Alliance, BC Arts Council, Columbia Basin Trust Community Initiatives and Affected Areas Program, TEC, and Columbia Power Corporation. So thank you to everybody who will participate in the programming workshops. We're glad you're taking time out today to take part in the workshops. They should be really amazing just from what we witnessed yesterday. If you're leaving us now, thanks so much for attending, and we hope to see you again soon.
And just a quick note to say, the artist that Sarah was speaking about who grew the begonia seed in her eye is Ana Maria Gomez Lopez. I'm going to check her out right now. Yeah. So thank you, everybody, and have a great Sunday.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Bye.
Keep in touch.